Hi, thanks for tuning in to Gotham Sound TV or Gotham TV. I'm Nick Huston here with Cory Allen.
Hello.
Hi, Cory.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Happy to be here.
Fantastic. So today we are going to talk about a shared experience that Cory and I had doing a reunion show for reality television. And we're just going to break it down from a sound aspect. I'm stuck. We're going to break it down from soup to nuts, from the beginning of pre-production all the way through the end, technical, logistics, all those things. So anyway, the show was the Real Housewives of Atlanta, reunion season 8, which was very exciting. Cory actually appeared on the show.
I did appear on the show. I made the edit. Much to my surprise, one of my friends actually texted me and was like, my mom just started screaming that she thought that I had handed Andy Cohen a box of mints. It was actually the earwig. But yeah, I made the edit. So I'm famous now.
Yeah, there you go. So he's got an appearance fee. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
So let's get into, so first of all, we have a kind of a, our trip slideshow presentation planned, but if there are any questions, you guys have any things you want to know about, please leave us a comment, and we will try and answer it as best we can. So let's talk about production, pre-production and logistics. So I've been doing the show for about 5 years. So I've kind of got it locked in at this point. But every year, what's nice about this show is, first of all, they book you weeks out. And they also have, several weeks out, have a phone call with everybody involved. So you've got the EPs down to the APs, video, comms, lighting, art, the whole thing. So we have this call. And there are generally about 5 minutes submitted for sound. That's nice. Yeah, nice.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 whole minutes?
Well, that's all we need at this point. But basically, what comes out of that is, what are the requirements? What are the requirements in terms of number of cast, in terms of, Andy's earwig, so that they can speak to Andy. Andy is the host for people that don't watch the show, as I don't watch the show. But Andy's the host. He has an earwig. Also, what are the needs for audio distribution? So it's not just sending a wireless a scratch track to camera. It's actually sending a scratch track to many different places for producers to hear, both via speaker and via IFB. It's also going to the decks and also going to the comms so people on the floor can hear that. And then also just being prepared to send anywhere else. Time code distribution, who's going to be the master, who's going to be who's going to slave to the master, all that stuff. Playback, how they're going to handle playback, because that seems to change every year. And then the one crew size, and the one thing that seems to be changing every year is what they're doing with behind the scenes. Right. So they seem to do a lot more behind the scenes, where we've seen. In the first year I did this, it just be all we want is what's going on in the control room. And now each year they've added a little bit more. Well, now we want a wireless boom. Well, now we want to be able to shoot back in their dressing room.
And when you say behind the scenes, you mean not just on the main stage?
Right, not just on the main stage,
right.
But actually with actually back in the cast dressing rooms.
Right.
So with Andy.
So it's behind the scenes. It's behind the scenes in a sort of part of the show sort of way. Exactly.
Where I think that they want to have the flexibility to, as if goes down, stuff goes down, or pops off, as they say.
Right.
They want to have the ability to cover that, and they also want to have the ability to show the girls getting ready and do interviews and do things for web content. So as content is not just television anymore, it's now the web. They're doing a lot more things with these things. So basically, we wound up with a list of specs, things to hit. And came up with this beautiful floor plan, which I just drew.
there's a lot of information.
Yeah,
here.
there's quite a bit of information.
Picture's
there.
worth 1,000 words.
Yeah. So this is a rough floor plan of what we're dealing with. And as you can see, the large square on the top is the set. So the way that it's set up is you see that the square underneath where it's set, that is the host's chair. And typically the other cast are on 2 couches on either side of them.
Represented by those rectangles.
Yes, represented by rectangles. So our basic plan and the way that we've always done this is typically we only need 2 antennas. So if you can see those kind of half circle things that say PWS, those are the domes that we mounted in the lighting truss. Okay. Underneath on the left-hand side, you'll see a little box that says Phonak. It's probably very hard to read, but that is where we did the, oh good, we've got a mouse. This is exciting.
Hey.
Hey-o.
Spared no expense.
So as we mentioned, Andy has an earwig. So we had Andy's earwig transmitter stationed just off of set.
And for anybody who's watching who doesn't know what an earwig is, it is the in-ear receiver that the producers use to talk to Andy. Just in case anybody's watching who doesn't know that.
So if they ask him some random fact and he doesn't know, the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow, he can actually look it up.
Right.
And have somebody tell him that.
African or European.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know that. Anyway, so our antennas are all run in through there. And if we go back to that, there's one doorway, which we are very diligent about putting sound blankets up around just to keep the chatter from the control room, which is kind of at a low din, separate from the actual set. So then we have the control room kind of in that lower left-hand corner. The front table is our director and TD. The second table from the back is where the producers who talk to Andy sit. The racks on both the left and right are both comms and video. You have somebody doing color live. You also have a whole comms rack for all the cameras. We're talking about 9 cameras here, just the pedestal cameras, which means that there are 9 VTR decks. There's a playback section, and then audio, we are all the way in the back. Okay. So the main set is the main thing we're covering, but one thing that we've learned is that, in addition to wanting to have the E&G crews cover the behind the scenes, the people in the control room often want to listen. So where you saw the arrow pointing back to BTS, we also ran another antenna feed, 250 foot plus, back there with another dome on it. And we also ran an XLR cable back there just in case, because sometimes there are producers that are back there that want to be able to monitor from back there. An IFB feed's just not going to cut it. So sometimes we do an open speaker. So we ran that this year, but didn't actually need it, which was nice.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
That layout of the set, the control room, and BTS, how much of an idea, because we didn't really talk about this beforehand, but how much of a semblance of that did you have before we actually got there on the day?
Well, that is incredibly similar to the previous years. So they actually did send a floor plan that was a lot more involved than that one.
Less Sharpie and
less Sharpie and more like
lines.
actual building.
Right.
But it didn't have it didn't have the drawings of the set and what. So I decided to redo it. But it's typically the same every year at this point. There was a period of time where their dressing rooms were upstairs. It takes place in kind of a famous Georgia landmark, which I probably shouldn't mention.
Biltmore Ballrooms?
The Biltmore Ballrooms, there you go, Cory mentioned it for me. So they used to have their dressing rooms upstairs, at which point we could never hear them no matter what we did. So a few years ago, they moved them downstairs, both for ease of just walking them across the lobby, and then it also made our job a lot easier because we could just run an antenna, which typically they get wired in BTS. So when they get wired, I'll call out on the A2, we'll call out on the walkie, I've just wired, Nini or whoever it is. And then we'll be able to listen to it in the control room as opposed to being able to hear them only when they get in range.
Right. In a situation where the miking is taking place far away from the control room setup and where our antenna arrays are, you'd have to trust the ENG mixers to be able to do a proper line check before they walk to set.
Exactly, which is great. The two guys that were on this, Joe Grizzle and Josh Gladue, they did a fantastic job. But it's always good to when you're the supervisor to be able to put your own ears on it. Yeah. So
get that out of the way.
Exactly. So one of the things that we talked about was comms, right? So we clearly had to interface with comms, not only giving them a feed, but also they had 5 wireless belt packs. Was it 5 or 4?
I don't remember. I think it was 4. I think it was just one base station.
And 4 belt packs.
We do have the wireless inventory list that would probably help clear that up.
Yeah.
But that's when planning the RF side of it. You definitely can't assume that you're the only person there with wireless.
Right.
So that ended up being the only other element that we weren't entirely responsible for that we had to take into account when we were doing the wireless coordination.
Right. Exactly. And that was something that we talked about on the call. Where they were in the E88 range for the telex, which fortunately was well outside of our Talent Wireless, which was Block 21 and Block 26, and then our IFB range as well, which was 19. So that was nice to be able to pre-coordinate and not just be surprised, which fortunately they're very good at. So that gives us our specs. I believe we had 12 Talent. Expected. We wanted to have a wireless boom, and then we wanted to have 2 ENG crews. So that would mean 3 channels of IFB. So that brings us to the equipment that we chose. So let's talk about the equipment that we chose. So let's see the first piece of equipment that we chose. There it is.
That is a Behringer X32 producer or compact.
It's one of the two. I can't tell. But yeah, we chose a Behringer X32. And a lot of what we chose was based on what was available here at Gotham.
It's the compact.
Yeah, it's the compact. How can you tell?
The producer one does not have the user assignable buttons over on the side.
Aha, I see. There you go. Okay. So a lot of it was based on what we had at Gotham, but this mixer in particular, as opposed to any other thing, for a couple of neat features. Number one was that it has Dante.
Yes.
So when we're doing 16 channels of audio in and out over to our recorders and our wireless, nice to be able to just run 2 Cat5 cables.
Right. 2 Cat5 cables per device instead of a plethora of XLRs, which doesn't sound like much, but it adds up, all of that patching in.
Yeah, and the first year that we did this, it was all XLRs, and it was just a mess.
Yeah.
The other nice thing about that particular board is it has the scribble strips, which you can do in different colors. So the way that we did it is we color coded them based on their gender, or based on their kind of level of importance. So if all the women for the show were in pink. So you can tell that there were 3 women sitting to the left of the host, who is in that kind of aquamarine, and then 4 women sitting to the right of the host. And then when their husbands or boyfriends, or they are housewives, but they weren't all wives, came out, we had additional people in blue, and then I believe the boom was in yellow, and we had playback in white.
Looks right.
Yeah, so that was nice. So next slide. Corey,
the rack.
The rack.
The rack.
Racks on racks on racks.
So this was kind of nice because we were able to fit all of the audio engineering side of it into one rack. At the top, we have a Furman that's distributing AC power to everything. Directly under that is a NanoSync HT sync generator, both Genlock and word clock generator, and also I think the timecode master for us.
I think we actually decided that we were going to be, we were not going to be the master, and we took a signal from video.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is the nice thing about those generators, is they can usually either be a master or a slave, but it kept all of our stuff in, it provided a nice accurate clock signal, steady clock signal for our devices. Under those, you have 2 Sound Devices 970 recorders operating in parallel as a primary and a backup.
Being fed via Dante.
Yes, being fed via Dante, which is one of the, again, we really do love Dante, just plugging in those Cat5 cables instead of a bunch of XLRs or even the DB25 connectors or anything can be clumsy. But yeah, it's very nice as long as you know what you're doing with the network.
Yeah.
Below that, we have a Venue 2, Electrosonics Venue 2 receiver.
And that was a nice upgrade over, that was a nice upgrade.
Yeah, specifically the control software. I'm blanking on the name. The
Wireless Designer, I believe they call it. Yeah.
The Electrosonics Wireless Designer, which has a very similar layout to a lot of the other Electrosonic software. Very intuitive, very responsive. And I love to be able to remote control everything.
Yes.
If I don't need to be next to a particular device, then I like to be able to control it from anywhere. So that's really nice. And then below that, we have 2 of the previous generation Venue receivers, the VRMs. And below that, that is the professional wireless DB8 multi-coupler for our antennas. Below that, we have some Ethernet switches to manage the Dante network and a UPS on the bottom,
I think there was a UPS.
Yeah, so
that's hard to see.
To make sure that we were still providing power to everything in the event of a power kickout, we have an uninterruptible power supply to make sure everything stays running, even when somebody trips over the cables.
Yep. And
which fortunately didn't happen.
Did not happen. And just to note, all of the power was being run off a generator. So that actually wound up being one of the things that we were waiting on quite a bit, was we had quite a bit of it set up.
Right.
We had to wait to get power.
Right. And that's not unique to that show. I've definitely been on other shows where you build everything, you're ready to turn it on, and there's no power.
And there's no power, not yet. Waiting for the generator.
Right.
So let's see some of the other toys that we were able to bring. So this is the station that the producers were feeding Andy Cohen, questions and thoughts and feedback from. So pretty simple setup, just a Shure 522 push to talk. I call it like the principal's microphone into a Sound Devices mix pre to amplify it to line level.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Exactly. All AC power there. And really, it could have been anything, but we used the Sound Devices mix pre because it was available.
Right.
But it could have been any mic to line amplifier.
Right.
And then that was going into was being run out to the floor to the Phonax. Now, it's really difficult to see here, but you see a giant phase right antenna in front of you, and you can definitely see a Comtech BST25 off to the right. But what you probably can't see is a black box in the curtain, which is the new the Phonak Roger base station.
Yes.
So we were able to get it's something we haven't had in our rental department up to this point, but we were able to get a demo unit and to be able to get hands on the Phonak Roger and base station just to try it out. And mostly positive, right?
I think entirely positive. I think when we first did that, when we were setting up and checking all the equipment, and we did a walk test with the earwig, the moment I put it in my ear and you started talking, I was like, this is night and day better than any other in-ear receiver that I've listened to before. So I love that thing.
Yeah. And from a quality standpoint, great. The range was better than I'd expected. We were able to get the whole set and even part of the control room, which was more than we needed. And the best part was that when there was no program being fed, with the normal Comtex, you get that kind of
little noise floor.
You would get nothing. And when you went out of range, instead of getting you would just get this lovely little beep, beep, beep. Andy didn't notice the difference, which at the end of the day,
he shouldn't.
Is neither good nor bad. It's just like
that's his mind was busy with other things.
Right. Yeah. One of the hardest working guys on that set for sure. And then another cool toy that we got to play with, which I really loved, was the Cedar DNS2. So we brought our rental unit of that. I hadn't personally used it. It was really nice for just taking out that little bit of background noise.
Yep.
The Biltmore is on a busy street, and invariably there's chatter in the background.
And just having bodies in the room and
Yeah.
a large ballroom like that, there is going to be some noise. And there was definitely a pretty substantial difference between the pre-Cedar and post-Cedar.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my only complaint about the Cedar is that it doesn't have any kind of onboard DC backup.
Right.
For when you power it down so you don't lose your settings, or maybe something kicks out, or
Right.
somebody turns off the power strip it's plugged into.
Yeah, who would
Those
do
things.
that?
Who would do that? I don't know. It definitely didn't happen in the
Definitely
middle of
not
the
me.
take. So those were the cool things. So let's. Anything else? Was there anything else we did?
Gear-wise,
Yeah, I think that's.
I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the actual production of it, yes, that pretty much covers it.
There we go.
We did have we had like laptops and computers to control things, sort of as some, just consolidating the control of everything so that you don't have to go from device to device. That always helps. And that's part of it, but that wasn't necessarily essential equipment. It was just things to make our lives easier.
Right. And we can talk a little bit about the E&G side. We don't have any pictures of it, but it was just a very standard two 788Ts, each with an IFB transmitter, sending a scratch track to camera.
Right.
And I think they were SRBs or SRCs in camera, lock boxes, the whole bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
We didn't really focus too much on the ENG.
No, we just let them do their thing.
Yes, those guys were great at managing those bags themselves and leaving us to do our thing.
Exactly. All right, so let's go. So that was the setup process. Let's go to the day before show. So there's Cory
there's me.
doing two very important things.
Start paperwork.
Gotta make sure
First
you
thing
get
you gotta
paid.
do.
Yep.
And then the first thing after the start paperwork that I did when we landed was RF survey. I brought my RF Explorer with me and went straight onto the set and scanned the entire UHF range, even though we were going to be only in whatever blocks we were in. But taking into account that comms was using the E88 bases and everything, you usually just want a picture of what you're working with in case things have to change. So I did a full scan. Here's a picture of us.
There's the picture.
There's the picture of us having done a successful coordination. You can see in there in the green landscape of the RF in Atlanta, which has a couple of television transmitters and stuff, and those white vertical lines represent all the frequencies that we were using.
And let's actually bump into the next frame.
Yeah, so that's an actual one-to-one screen cap of what we're looking at there. So this is Sure's wireless workbench software, which I use to make the coordination. There's a software utility that the RF Explorer uses called Touchstone Pro, which will take the data and make it ready for wireless workbench. And so using this software, you build an inventory of the devices that you're going to be using under the inventory tab. Can you actually switch over to the other screen cap? Yeah, so this is the inventory page where you tell the software, this is what I'm going to be using. And you can see on the top we have a couple of our talent transmitters and then the IFBs below that. But then on the bottom I also made designated frequencies for the comms, the wireless intercom, which it looks like there are indeed 4 belt packs and then 2 frequencies for the base station to transmit on. And then going back to the actual coordination, once all of those are loaded in, then it uses its algorithms to spit out a bunch of frequencies, which will all be compatible with one another. And you can see a couple of, it took a couple passes. I think this might be from one of the earlier passes, but the first coordinations don't always come out great because you have to play around with things like exclusion threshold, like how much noise you're willing to tolerate. So, but yeah, that's what basically did our entire RF plot. And fortunately, there were no RF issues for the entire show.
It was rock solid.
No matter where they went. So I felt pretty happy with that.
It was really good. It worked out very well. And I think that had a lot to do, obviously, with the coordination. I think using the domes was really key.
Antenna placement and antenna design, for sure.
Getting them up high. And the other thing just want to go back, can we go back 2 frames to Cory Finglot, his start paperwork? So this was the control room. That was actually the audio table that Cory was at. So this is what we had to start with, which was a whole bunch of nothing.
Whole lot of nothing.
Yeah. So while we were doing the frequency coordination and all that, we started building. So running all the antenna cables, we were using low loss antenna because we were using runs of at least 100 feet for everything. We remoted the Comtech base stations.
Do we have amplifiers on the?
We did not have amplifiers on the domes.
Amplifiers, right.
Yeah, didn't need it. But if we'd been using shark fins, we probably would have had amplifiers. I find the amplifiers are a good way to test the lines, though, because they have the little lights that light up.
Right.
So let's go to our kind of setup in progress. Anyway, so this is what the control room looked like as we were setting it up. You can see we've got the audio desk in our foreground all the way at the back. We've got 2 monitors for the TD and the director all the way in the front, and then we're starting to build things. Where that gentleman named Ross is in the red is where the playback station was. The playback station is kind of not a particularly interesting setup, but basically there was one gentleman on playback who would queue up the KeyPro, I believe it was. The air conditioning's coming on. No? Oh, it's raining. It's raining in New York, guys, just in case you didn't know.
If you tuned in for weather, this is your...
Today in New York, rain!
Your 2:42 weather update.
Right.
Rain in New York. Now back to audio.
Now back to audio. So the playback was basically just taking a primary and a secondary source into a mixing board and then taking the output of the mixing board, a direct out of the mixing board, to our audio board to be able to mix it into, to be able to capture it all, and also be able to mix it into the producer feeds. But then the output of the, another output of the mixing board, post fader for playback going to the floor, so that the talent could see the roll-in packages.
Which on our highly technical schematic, you can actually see the placement of the speaker, which was basically underneath the camera wall.
Yeah.
You can see right there in the center of the picture, speaker with some sound lines coming out of it.
Yeah. JBL Eon 10.
Eon 10.
Done. That's one other...
Tried and true.
Yeah, tried and true. It worked fine. That's one other note is, when you're preparing for a show like this, you never know who's going to show up. It's a lot like a commercial in that way. Everybody either wants headphones or they're going to want to hear. So bringing extra speakers is a must. If we go back to that schematic, you'll see, we love the schematic, Jared. You'll see there's something that says network. That was an emergency speaker we had to add at the very last minute.
And network meaning representatives from Bravo or VIPs who would be cordoned off in their own VIP area. So a little speaker over there. Another difficulty with those kinds of situations is once you have speakers in an open environment, then you'll have like the battle between the speakers and the microphones, or some producers are like, there's a speaker on somewhere that shouldn't be, and it's another producer listening to a speaker, something like that. So that's always a fun thing to manage as well, is, open speakers. Ideally, everybody's on headphones.
Right. And the other thing that's fun about those speakers is those monitors have a delay to them because of
the video delay, to match the video delay.
Exactly. So that was one thing that we had to match up. But basically, keeping them low enough, building the sound baffle to try and keep that chatter out of it as well, was very important. Okay, so moving on. Let's see the next picture. There we go.
Hey, it's
So
our A2 table.
Yeah, it's our A2 table. That is Sharita. So she is labeling everything, batting everything, programming in all the frequencies into the bags so that the E&G guys, when they come in the next day, can just very quickly dial between all the frequencies. We did wind up making a face chart, which had everybody's frequency on it and their face and their name.
Right.
It was very exciting, and fortunately, and that was really where we kept all our expendables. So you needed tape, you needed batteries, you needed an ankle strap, a safety pin, whatever, you would go there. We also did run a time code drop there, so the bags could easily jam.
That's sort of the interface between the control room and like all the moving pieces going past the control room. So in terms of sort of like zone covering areas, zones being like the control room and the set and the hallways between set and the behind the scenes area, makeup area. That's it. It is kind of nice when you're like running from one area to another to just like have that table right next to the hallway to like I need to change somebody's batteries. You're running through and the table. You don't have to like go into the control room area, dig around. It's just all laid out right there.
Exactly. So that was there for speed. And let's see, what else do we have? Okay, and so this was kind of our finalized setup after testing everything. We fired everything up. We actually wound up wiring stand-ins that they had on set and just making sure that everybody not only sounded good, but there were no RF problems. So we had a couple of laptops as a control surface. And then the other thing you'll notice is we did get our own Video Village monitor. I opted not to go for the split screen. I like to usually get just the wide shot so I can tell. I don't want to watch the cut down because I don't know who's talking because I'm not super familiar with their voice. So I want to see the wide shot so I can see who's talking. And then my channels are laid out on the mixing board in that same
In
order.
reference to the wide shot.
So I can say third from the left, go. Right. And then the other thing is, we were on comms. Specifically, you were on comms.
I was on comms, and then I'd bump you whenever we were about to come back from VTR, back to live, or any other cue that I guess I needed to relay, because your job is listening. Your ears were busy, but my ears were free.
Yeah.
So during the actual taping, that was the division of labor.
Right, exactly. And you were also making sure that the recorders kept recording.
Yes.
While I was dealing with the mix.
Yes.
One thing I should mention, we did not use the auto mix function on this because I did not know that it had just become available in a firmware update.
On the
Behringer? Yeah.
I don't think I knew that was
Apparently it exists now.
But we did have the Cedar, which
Yep.
did something similar as far as the end result.
Yep.
But we'll play around with that, I guess, on the next one.
on the next one, coming soon. All right, so that was a wrap on the prep day. It was a good 10 hours of prep. We did have 5 hands working, so it was myself, you, Sharita, Arjun and Rico. Arjun and Sharita as A2s, and then Rico as kind of our audio PA. The many hands made light, just the right amount of work. I wouldn't call it light, but it was just right.
Just right.
Yeah.
I barely saw any of them because they were usually running cables and, everyone was busy.
Everyone was busy. All right, so let's go to day of show. So first and foremost, the most important thing when you're starting a show where you know it's going to be a long day, and we did know it was going to be a long day, is breakfast.
Gotta have breakfast.
So here is
to fuel
breakfast. We have breakfast.
We're standing by
coming.
for breakfast.
Standing by for breakfast. Sound guys always know where the food is. Let's see. Anyway, we ate breakfast. That was the first thing. We got there a little bit early to make sure that we were able to shovel pancakes into our mouths. This was the crew and producer area. In the background is where the lobby is, then by the control room. And then day of show, if we want to move on to the next slide, last minute preparations, making sure that everybody's got either fresh tape or fresh tape in terms of hiding the lav, or they've got fresh batteries in it, which we actually did check the night before, but just double checking everything, organizing it so people can just run off and bring the microphones with them. We actually needed security to get back to where the cast was.
Right.
So that was fun.
It was a VIP only area.
Yeah.
You needed the right credentials to get in. And, they definitely don't want to make sure anybody comes in off the street and, I don't know, does something crazy with our cast members.
Because that's happened. All right, so moving on. So that was the prep for that. What else do we have, Jared? What's next? There we go. This is kind of an action shot.
Action shot.
Yeah.
You'll notice the recorders are lit up, recording red. As I'm taking this picture, I was still making sure that they were recording.
Yep.
As
Very
my
nice.
job dictated I do.
And you can notice there's a whole sea of people in there, each that need, their own different thing from us. And there's us after a successful shoot, or actually probably in the middle of a successful shoot while we're in a break. But it was a very long day. I think we started at 9 in the morning and we went until about 2 at night.
Sounds about right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not the longest day in the world, but not the shortest day in the world.
Certainly.
And at the end of the day, we didn't have a whole day to wrap out. We actually wrapped out that night. So pulled all the cable, packed it all up, had time to take a full crew selfie. There we are. And then in the next frame, you can see all the gear ready to pick up. So all that gear condenses down. I think it was 10 cases.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, 9 or 10 cases. And then Cory was later stuffed in one of them.
Yep.
To save on airfare.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's cheaper to fly freight.
Yeah, exactly. A little slower. So that is, and at the end of the day, we also did copy files off of the 970 onto a hard drive that was provided by production. We copied the CF card files as well from the 788s, just to make sure that everything was all in the same place, even though production did walk away with the CF card files. But ultimately, that was it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we were in there for a total of, 36, 40 hours?
Yeah.
So yeah, that just goes to show how you start with nothing, and then we had a whole big fancy lit up control room, and then it was back to nothing.
And then it was back to nothing, exactly.
Yeah.
I will say that doing a job like this, there's a couple of potential pitfalls that happen. Production is crazy. So you always want to make sure that you have extra of all the things. So you have
extra everything, backups of everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So we had, I think we only wound up using 13 channels of wireless, but the spec had been to 14, but we had a 16th channel just in case, 1 or 2 went down, or if we needed to change blocks. We had extra batteries.
Of course, always extra batteries.
And then the other thing that was interesting to me that happened is there was, when you're dealing with something that's put together so fast, not the people in production aren't always on the same page. So a lot of times, we will get conflicting information. So one person had told us that we were going to expose the lobs, which I, personally would love, because it just makes our lives a lot easier.
It takes the variables of clothing noise, and it takes a lot of variables out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
But knowing that show, we've never exposed the lobs ever. So
be ready for both.
Yeah, exactly. So ready for both, but also making sure that that I would tell once I heard that from the one person, telling who I would envision as my boss, the person who hired me, hey, this person's talking about this. Is that right? That's not right. You tell them. Well, why don't you guys talk?
Why don't you guys come together and have a little chat?
And let us know. So a lot of it becomes about brokering communication.
Yeah. I had I think it must have been another show that I was working on where I think I had asked somebody in production, because no producers were present, if there was a precedent for hidden lobs or exposed lobs, and they said that they preferred hidden lobs. And so I hid them, and in the middle of a take, the producer's like, "The mic fell." And I was like, "What? No, it sounds fine." "No, the mic fell. I can't see it anymore." And I was like, "Oh, well, I guess there was some lack of communication between them about whether the mics were going to be visible. I don't remember what show that was, but I thought it was a fun little experience.
And that was the concern with the woman who wanted to have them exposed as well, was them falling. Apparently,
Right.
they'd done another reunion in a different city where they had fallen quite a bit.
Right.
And so, we always make sure that they don't fall, but this time we
Extra made
made sure. And they
Extra,
didn't fall.
extra.
We used a lot of safety
A
pins.
lot of safety
Yeah.
pins, a lot of strain relief tape, and
Yeah.
doing all the things.
Yeah, all
to
the
make
things.
Sure. All the things.
The team did a good job.
It's another tip for you pros out there. Always do all the things.
All the things, not just some.
Not just some of the things. Do all the things.
So, Joe, anything? We're good? All right, perfect. So that was the anatomy of the Real Housewives of Atlanta.
Oh, and that's our system test.
Oh, this is our system test.
to make
right.
sure that the board was working. But it's also our way of celebrating that
Everything's working.
everything works.
Yeah. So on that note, this has been the anatomy of a reality television reunion show.
Yep.
Thanks for watching, and tune in next week for something completely different.
2 Monty Python references.